Hello, everybody. I am Allie from Nora's Nursery, and I'm here with senior sleep consultant and expert Laura Wilson.
Hello. Hi, Nora's Nursery. Thanks for
Hello,
having
so happy
me
to have you.
again.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
exciting.
excited.
So, in our last episode, we talked about sleep training and introduction to sleep training, and then we're going to be shifting gears this time into sleep regressions. So, what are sleep regressions, and then when do they typically occur?
Sure. So, sleep regressions are actually a really positive time in your child's life. Typically, it's when they're going through a developmental milestone, they're growing, they're changing, they're learning something new. Unfortunately, for us parents, it usually means that it affects sleep, right?
Yeah.
Babies are growing and developing so much when they're sleeping, and they love to practice all of these new skills in the crib or when they should
Yeah.
be or when they should be sleeping. So
Yeah.
it does impact sleep. There's the common 4 month sleep regression that that a lot of people have heard of. It can happen at any time, though. It can happen at 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. It
Oh,
usually is when your baby's sleep has changed and not really returned back to normal, then like you're in
oh,
a regression.
okay.
There's a mini one at 6 months. There's a big one at 8 or 9 months. That's a really
Okay.
difficult one. There's another mini one at a year, another mini one at 18 months, and then there's another big one at
Mhm.
2 years. So
We
those are the
haven't
kind of
yet.
the two one is hard, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. But those are kind of the most common ones that I hear about.
Okay. So with sleep training, can that impact sleep regressions?
Yeah, so typically when you sleep train, your child is capable of going to sleep independently and then they wake up and it's more difficult for them to go back to sleep. When they're in a regression, they start to exhibit some new habits that
Okay.
maybe they didn't exhibit before or during sleep training. So it kind of, throws things off. It does
Mhm.
interrupt sleep. And, often parents are, kind of caught off guard and not too sure what to do. If they've done sleep training, then they usually can stick to the plan and follow that plan and kind of ride the wave. And then
Mhm.
most babies that have kind of those sleep skills or sleep hygiene will get out of that regression in anywhere from like 2 to 4 days, sometimes a
Oh,
little bit
wow.
longer, a week or 2 weeks. Yeah.
Mhm.
And those babies that have never done the sleep training, that regression just kind of sticks and stays. So
Mhm.
yeah, new skills are developed. Like sometimes now they're like screaming in the crib, and
Mhm.
they never used to do that before. They were like a great sleep trained baby and went to sleep no problem, but now they're going through like this separation anxiety and they're screaming in the crib. And so parents are like, oh gosh. So sometimes you have to re sleep train again to kind of get them
Okay.
back on track. It's not usually as long and, as intense as the first time you do it.
Mhm.
Sometimes a night or two, or just stick to that plan and ride the wave and you'll be back on track within a couple days.
Awesome. So
Hmm.
with the sleep regressions, are they predictable? I know you were saying that it can kind of happen, like the 4 month sleep regression, for example, you're saying can happen around 3 months, 6 months. So are you able to kind of predict that based on like your baby's milestones and things like that?
Not necessarily. I mean, you can look for kind of clues that they might
Hmm.
be hitting a regression, that something might be up again if sleep has
Hmm.
changed, or if you notice that they're like really working hard on learning a new skill. So it's like,
Oh, okay.
oh, they're really working on, talking. They're like babbling a lot and new sounds, or they're really
Hmm.
working on learning how to crawl.
Oh, yeah.
And then you kind of put two and two together and you're like,
Hmm.
whoa, you're changing. You're learning how to crawl. You're learning how
Yeah.
to walk. You're trying to pull yourself up more. And now all of a sudden you're trying to do that in the crib or do
Yeah.
that when you're supposed to be sleeping. So then
Yep.
you're like, it kind of dawns on you like, okay, you're
Hmm.
probably in a regression. So they're not predictable, but if you were aware of, when your child's kind of in that developmental milestone, a leap, then it
Yeah.
can kind of help you understand that you're also in a sleep regression.
Okay. Yeah,
Mhm.
that makes a lot of sense actually now that you point that out because I remember when my toddler, when she was starting to talk, she just wanted to babble in her crib all day
Hmm.
long. And then when she
Oh
was
yeah.
learning how to pull up, she'd want to stand, then you need to lower the
Oh
crib
yeah.
and all that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Right. They're doing these new skills. And like I said, so sometimes that really kind of throws parents off where they're like,
Hmm.
the little one's like standing in the crib, like screaming and crying. And parents are like,
Hmm.
what should we do? I don't know what to
Yeah.
do. Like they've never done this before. And, parents were like, is something wrong? Are they
Yeah.
teething? Are they sick? Like what's going
Yeah.
on? And so that's where it's like a slippery slope where, if you're, changing what the normal expectation is for sleep, then, they get used to that and they want that every single time. But if you've done sleep training, that's where like you would stick to your plan and kind of ride the wave and, be there for your child during this process, but try not to form any new habits if possible.
Okay. I wish I knew some of this stuff before, because when I had my little one, she's 2.5 now. She just turned 2.5, and
Yeah.
I had no idea about sleep regressions. I had no, I was
Yeah.
first time mom. I had no idea, and then hitting like the 4 month sleep regression, it just kind of is like, whoa, like you're kind of like having to relearn everything constantly. But it's kind of nice being able to associate like these huge like physical milestones, like you were saying,
Mhm.
like crawling or like talking and all that kind of stuff, and how it can really impact their sleep.
For sure. And like as a first time mom, like you're kind of just like given this baby and they kick you
Yeah.
out of the hospital or whatever if you're at home birth
Mhm.
and your midwives leave and you're like, what
Mhm.
do I do? So
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
lot of us just kind of survive, but we don't have the time to like research and kind of, go down
Yeah.
the rabbit hole of sleep on the internet and figure out what's going on. So
Mhm.
we just kind of survive. But now
Yeah.
looking back, when you have more time, and now it's like there's so much information out there, which is really
Oh yeah.
great, right? So,
Mhm.
I had my first 12 years ago now, and, there wasn't Instagram and all that
Yeah.
stuff, that we can go on social media and follow sleep consultants. So, you're just learning through family and friends. But now there
Yeah.
is a lot of information out there that can help parents. Sometimes it's conflicting and confusing, which can be, a downside because it's a little, like I said, conflicting and stressful. But yeah, there's definitely lots of information out there, which, helps you through those times for sure.
So you were talking about how there are sleep regressions that can occur at a few different stages in our little ones' lives. So can you give us, all of us parents, some ideas like when we can expect them and then what we can do when our little one hits those regressions?
Yeah, so I mentioned the common times for sleep regressions, but some of the obvious signs that parents might want to look for, or even some of the reasons why your child is going through regressions are number one, the 4 month sleep regression. Typically, that's when your child is, not a newborn anymore. They are a baby now. So sleep looks very different compared to newborn sleep and
Mhm.
baby sleep. They need to produce melatonin. They now have sleep cycles, and they're learning new skills, right? So they're starting
Mhm.
to smile. Rolling is a really common one as
Oh yeah.
well. Your little one starts to roll in the crib. And as much as most babies actually sleep better on their stomachs, we always
Mhm.
place them on their back, but they like to roll and then they don't know
Yeah.
how to get back, and that
Yeah.
interrupts sleep. So rolling
Oh,
is a
I
really
never thought about it
common
like that.
one. Yeah. You
Okay.
have to kind of learn how to sleep, right? From
Mhm.
newborn to, X number of age, they're placed on their back and they sleep on their back. And
Mhm.
now they're on their tummy and, now they have to relearn kind of how to sleep on their stomach. And number
Okay.
one, it scares us parents,
Yeah, I remember that. I was thinking that too. I
Yeah,
remember seeing
yeah.
my little one, she'd be over on her belly, and I'd be like freaking out because they say to always put them on their backs.
Yeah,
I
and they
remember that.
sleep like face down, like
Yeah,
squished into the
like
mattress,
smushed.
and that really freaks his parents out. So, I
Yeah.
mean, they have flat noses. Like any pediatrician or sleep consultant or doctor will tell you if they can roll by themselves onto their stomach, then it's okay. Then it's safe for them to sleep on their stomach.
Mhm.
But for sure, it like makes us parents like nervous. So a lot of us like rush in and flip them back, and then they wake up again in the night and they roll
Yeah.
again. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's a common one around the 4 months,
That
where
makes a lot of
yes,
sense.
their sleep resembles more of like baby sleep or adult sleep and not
Mhm.
necessarily newborn sleep where they're sleeping all the time. So you get a lot of like short naps and like multiple night wakings.
Mhm.
But again, that can happen at 3, 4, 5 months in range.
Mhm.
And then the other one is 6 months. And this is, again, kind of just more of a mini one. Sometimes they're working on sitting, depending on, when they're hitting their milestones, because every baby's different. So they hit them at different times. But it is a big, common separation anxiety time where they understand that they are separate than you. So that is like, oh, I place them down in their sleep space. space. And normally I would just kind of walk away and they'd go to sleep, or I can transfer them easily and they
Mm.
stay asleep. But now they understand that they're separate than you.
Yep.
So yeah, so it's like that object permanence thing, and
Hmm.
you leave the room and they get upset. So there is the mini one at that 6 months. And then 8 or 9 months, same thing that goes along with that separation anxiety. They just understand it a lot more now. And then depending on the development of the child, they're either again working on sitting. So sometimes they're literally sitting in the crib.
Yep.
So instead of standing or rolling in the crib, now they're just sitting in the crib when they should be napping or sleeping, and they're just sitting
Mhm.
there. So I've worked with many babies that literally will just fall asleep sitting there, and they'll
Oh,
just kind
really?
of like bob their
Oh,
head, and like they
the
do
bobbing.
that
Yep.
for, yeah, and I coach my clients through that, and they do that for a couple of days. Again, I coach them just how to respond to your child and what to do in those situations. But usually after 2, 3, 4 days, they usually figure it out and like know to lie back down.
Oh, yeah.
Or they're like standing in the crib. They're even
Yep.
more, advanced and
Hmm.
hit the milestones a little bit earlier. So they're standing in the crib, and, they're coming close to toddler time, 8, 9 months. So their cries are a lot, more intense and more extreme. So that really pulls on the heartstrings of the parents.
Yep.
12 months too. Teething can interrupt this time as well. It's a common
Oh,
time for
yeah.
the eye teeth. So that really interrupts, their sleep. It's pretty painful, those teeth that are coming in. Sometimes, again, that's when they're working on standing, talking, either walking, depending on, again, where they are in their developmental milestones. So that really interrupts sleep. A lot of parents at this 12-month age think that their child needs to go down to one nap because there's a lot of nap
That's what I was about to
protesting
ask.
and resisting. And I usually tell them just ride the wave. Like, sometimes it's a week or two at
Mhm.
this regression. Just, stick with it. Please don't cut that nap out yet. They
Mhm.
probably still need 2 naps. But some don't. Again, every child's different. But that's kind of something parents can look out for as well, as just nap protesting and not sleeping for that morning nap or that afternoon nap.
Mhm.
And then 15 months, same thing. There's a lot of developmental, some babies are delayed. So maybe they're working on, walking at this stage. So that can really hinder sleep. It is also a common time for nap transitions where they go from like 2 naps to one nap. So every nap transition gets harder and harder.
Yeah, that's what
So
I was
this
gonna ask
is,
about too.
yeah, so this is the second hardest one. And, you deal with a lot of like overtiredness where they,
Yes.
should be napping, but you don't want them to nap at that
Mhm.
time. And, you're keeping them up so they're overtired, and then having like, a crappy nap because they are
Mhm.
overtired. So, their mood is, they're cranky, they're miserable.
Yeah.
It does take a week to 2 weeks for the transition
Okay.
to happen. But yeah, sleep is just kind of a mess for a week or two.
Yeah.
And again, they're probably learning like some sort of developmental milestone of like talking a lot or walking or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then the 2-year-old one, that's a really, really big one.
That was our hardest one by
Yeah,
far, the 2-year-old one.
yeah, so that one, they are now like a full-blown toddler. If they have any, pacifiers or soothers, this is a common time where, maybe it wasn't a problem when they were a baby, but now it becomes like a big problem with
Oh yeah.
sleep. So sometimes they're like throwing it out of the crib, or, you give it to them and they don't want, they spit it out, they don't want it. They're just like being more manipulative and trying to get you in the room, or they're just like opposite. They're really, really relying on it and they want it and it falls out and they can't find it. And so usually that's like an issue that I deal with for the 2-year-olds at that time. They're also understanding that they are older. They understand a lot more, lots of developmental stuff going on. They're learning, but they're also two. So they're not able to really comprehend or rationalize as much as like a three
Yes.
year old or 4-year old or older would. And
Yeah.
they want to make their own choices. So it becomes like a bit of a power struggle, a lot of separation anxiety as well. So yeah, that one's hard. And again, because they're older, their tears are, it's like a full blown tantrum when they
Yes.
have like,
Oh
they're
yeah.
on the ground, they're screaming, they're crying, they're calling
Kind
your
of flailing
name.
around. Yep.
They're flailing. It's very, very extreme. So it's very
Hmm.
common for parents then to have a hard time dealing with that for
Yeah.
obvious reasons. And that's where sleep can really derail as well,
Hmm.
because of, the behavior that the child is displaying.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's kind of like an overall really quick summary of like what I have seen in regards to sleep regressions. Mm-hmm.
for us around like maybe like 15 months, I want to say. Like
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
when my toddler was around 15 months, like refused naps. So
Yeah.
what we did is we try to do like, people say online like, okay, just do quiet time, try and do quiet time. Didn't work, and she hasn't napped since. So since
She
like
hasn't
15,
napped since 15 months. Oh my
occasionally in the
gosh.
car, like if we'll go, we'll have a day at the park, something like that. She'll be, sometimes she'll knock out in the car, but like at home, she like refuses it. So the 15-month one was like really hard for us. And like, when I was going through it, I remember like talking to my friends, and everyone's like, oh no, mine still naps. But she still hasn't napped since then. And that was a hard one for
Yeah.
us because it kind of felt like it affected her nighttime sleep, of course, because, it just was like all over the place because she gets so tired and cranky. But
Yeah.
then, she wouldn't want to sleep. She
That's
wouldn't want to go
hard.
down for a nap. And then that kind of started this whole thing at nighttime with us where she would kind of like fight naps, or like fight like nighttime sleep. And as soon as, she still does this today too, at 2.5, here and there, where like whenever we'll say like, okay, it's time to go night night, she'll just burst into tears sometimes. Like she just gets so upset
Yeah.
when it comes to
Yeah.
sleep, and it just gets like,
Yes.
I feel so bad, but it's like, it's kind of difficult sometimes, like how, like thinking about how like nap time can really impact
Oh
their
yeah.
nighttime sleep.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. That's why, that regression can be, like I said, every nap transition can be hard, and,
Yeah.
it's a bit of a regression too. And that's why some parents just like give up on the nap. I mean,
Yeah.
that being said, your child could just be a child that
Mhm.
doesn't, require as much sleep. Like that is really young, but I have
Yeah.
worked with some that are 18, 19 months, 2 years of age, where they're just like done with naps, and
Yeah.
it's
It
really
was hard.
affecting
It was
their,
really
but
hard.
it's so hard when they're
Yeah.
that young for sure. And then, yeah, and then everything, like every sleep consultant or everything you read would tell you the same thing. Like, try to still have like quiet time, but
Yeah.
sometimes quiet time is stressful in itself for some children, right? You go and try to put them, maybe you put them in their crib.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have to make the room as dark. Maybe you just like, instead of pulling down the blackout blinds, you just pull like, draw the blinds or something
Mhm.
instead, and maybe leave the door open a little bit or to let some light in. And
Yeah.
so they can just relax or lie down in their crib. And that might work for some, but for
Yeah.
others, it's like, no, like I am not having this. I don't want anything to do with being in the room. So it's like, there goes your quiet time. And
Yeah.
and so I usually tell parents again to just stick with it, because it can be anywhere from a week to 2 weeks, sometimes even a month. So it's like,
Yeah.
just stick with it, don't give up, and like keep going back to trying to have them nap. But maybe if they don't want to do the full hour, maybe you just try for 5-10 minutes
Mhm.
increments just to see what happens. And then it's
Okay.
always early bedtimes. Like, if any of these regressions are like messing up
Oh, that's a good
kids,
point.
like, yeah, if any regressions are messing up babies or toddlers or children's sleep, which is very normal. It typically
Mhm.
messes up their naps, and they end up
Mhm.
like either protesting or resisting the nap, not having it. Just an early bedtime. Like, you can put them as bed as early as like 6 o'clock. So
Mhm.
that's what I usually tell parents. Just, they'll make up for that lost sleep that they've
Oh,
had.
okay.
From the daytime, they'll make up for it at night. Generally 10 to
That
12
makes sense.
hours is the recommended.
Mhm.
So if they're not napping, then they'll probably do like 12 hours at night, unless, like,
Yeah,
maybe in
that
your
was how it was for us.
situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So some of them just shift around their sleep, where let's say
Mhm.
they're a 12-hour baby, and but your daughter didn't want to nap, so she probably did 12 hours at night,
Yeah.
whereas others, maybe they did 10 or 11 hours of
Mhm.
nighttime sleep and then slept for an hour or two during the day. So some of them just shift around their sleep.
Mhm.
Um, I can say, for the parents like yourself that deal with a child that doesn't nap as well or require as much sleep, it's very challenging for you.
Mhm.
That being said, when they're older, when they become, teenagers or preteens or adults themselves, then they're able to cope with a lot of things in life a lot better than adults or teenagers who
Oh, wow.
require a lot of sleep. But like, just think about a teenage life in general, just in terms of
Mhm.
how busy it is and how
Yeah.
late they usually stay up. But
Yep.
then their day doesn't stop, right? The next day their school starts early,
Yeah.
like high school usually starts earlier than elementary school for
Mhm.
some crazy reason.
Yeah.
So if they're going to bed late and having to wake up early, and they're a person or an individual that requires a lot of sleep, that's really hard for them. Whereas,
Mhm.
like, maybe in your daughter's situation, she might not
Mhm.
require as much sleep, so she's able to like thrive and survive,
Oh, wow. I
a
didn't know
lot
that.
better than some.
Mhm.
So Does it, is it really challenging for parents when they're
Mhm.
little and young? Yes.
Yeah.
But in the long run, it can help them out for sure.
Okay.
So
That's
yeah,
good to
you
know.
have hope.
I
You
would
have
have I
hope.
would have never guessed that. But it does make sense now that you pointed out like that.
Yeah, and I find babies that, I don't know if she hit her developmental milestones early too, but some that don't require as much sleep, or babies that are like super active or hitting their milestones early, their
Hmm.
sleep tends to be affected as well. Like they hit those
Oh, okay.
regressions hard. They drop naps earlier than others. They like
Mhm.
they don't require as much nap as others. They're just
Oh, wow.
really active, babies and
Mhm.
toddlers. So it does, the regressions hit them hard for sure.
Okay. Because I went through that phase and I just remember thinking, you kind of get in your head and you're like, what am I doing wrong?
I
Like
know.
am I offering enough nap time? Like with the quiet time, I'm like, am I doing this right? What could I
Yeah.
improve? I kind of was very like critical of myself and I didn't really think about it
Yeah.
as, I didn't really associate the whole like developmental milestones and things like that and how that could
Hmm.
impact sleep. I was just kind of like, well, everyone else's, 15-month-old is taking a nap or two naps
Yeah.
still or sleeping for 2 hours. And then there's mine who just is bouncing off the walls, happy as can be till, 7 at night. So,
Yeah, I know it's hard not to compare, right? Everyone's
yes.
talking
Oh,
about
yeah.
sleep, everyone's
Mhm.
posting about sleep, so it's so hard not to compare. But that's one thing in my industry that after working with hundreds of babies and toddlers, like they're all not the same,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like I really have to get to know them and offer them personalized advice, and they're all not the same. Every single one of them is different. But yeah, trying not to compare is hard for sure. Generally, like let's say you were working with me in that situation, there could have been things that we could have tweaked or changed. So that's kind
Mhm.
of the nice thing about having a baby now, is like there's so much help out there, right? Just,
Oh, yeah.
follow me on Instagram, or follow
Mhm.
another sleep consultant, or, go down the rabbit hole of Dr. Google. There is lots of information, which is
Mhm.
helpful. But yeah, you never know. There could have been things, or that could have just been, your child. And no matter
Yeah.
what we do, that's just her,
Yeah.
right?
And it
Yeah.
makes me feel better knowing that too, because now that I'm pregnant with my second, I can kind of like I'm a little bit more prepared where I can,
Yeah.
be less what's the way to phrase it? Like hard on myself because I feel like as
Mhm.
as parents or as moms, like we're kind of just like, we always want to do what we think is best or like what can I do better to help them? But
For
like you're saying,
sure.
sometimes that's just how your baby is, that's just developmental. But it's kind of nice knowing, like especially from chatting with you today, like talking about like how their milestones and how so many things can really impact their sleep. I kind of feel more prepared now, and I wish I knew this stuff,
Yeah.
before I had my first one almost, because I feel like it would have taken a big like a big it was
Yeah.
like a relief.
Yeah, for sure. It's
I'm
so
not
it's
doing anything
very
wrong. It's just natural.
Yeah, for sure. And you're a great mom. You're a good mom, for thinking that, but it's
Yeah.
it's really hard on yourself, right? And that's a hard
Mhm.
to deal with and hard to cope. And I'm sure your little one probably sensed that at times too, that you were super stressed about it. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard. I mean, the biggest thing I tell parents is naps are really, really challenging, and like I said, regressions will hit naps hard.
Mhm.
But if you can get that really, solid restorative nighttime sleep, like
Yeah.
focus on that. Focus on one thing. There's
Yeah.
always something that, a little one is not great at, whether it's like
Mhm.
they're not great at naps, or bedtime is always a disaster, or their
Mhm.
night sleep is a disaster. If we can get that night sleep at least to be really restorative, and they're getting that like 10 to 12 hours of really restful
Mhm.
sleep, then work towards that goal. And if you can improve the other things, great. But yeah, the nighttime sleep is definitely super valuable and important for the little ones. So it sounds like your daughter slept well at night, and
Yeah.
and
We're
got
lucky in
what
that
she
regard.
needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's how it's helpful for everyone, right? Because
Mhm.
like if you're up at night and not sleeping, like, and she's up at night and not sleeping, you're both miserable and cranky
Yep.
the next day, right? For
Mhm.
sure. Hmm.
Yeah, and what
Awesome.
you were saying, it kind of sparked something in my brain. Um, can like a certain nighttime routine or things like what are some things that a parent can implement during
Mhm.
like a bedtime routine that can kind of help ease or these sleep regressions?
Yeah, for sure. Routine is super important, in regards to sleep regressions, in regards to
Mhm.
just being consistent with sleep, in regards to just having baby or toddler understand and expect what is to come. So, typical bedtime routine is, 30 minutes. If you're kind of doing the same thing every single night, like even as a newborn, you can start doing that. It might be a lot
Mhm.
shorter and
Yeah.
quicker and condensed. balanced. But if you're like setting the mood or the tone in the house can be really light is super important for sleep.
Yeah.
So, if you're dimming the lights at night, kind of mimicking that darkness, then that's when melatonin is produced, which is like the sleep signal for your brain, telling your brain it's time to sleep, it's time to sleep. So maybe you're closing the blinds or the shutters in your house, you're turning off like lots of music or stimulation, the TV, that
Oh
kind of
yeah,
things.
technology.
Yeah, technology. So that can really help a toddler or child who's like going through a regression and could be, super overstimulated because
Oh
they're
yeah.
learning all these new skills and development. Just kind of getting them in that bedtime routine
Kind of
and
help wind down a
mindset.
little bit. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And then, having that routine, like a standard routine of like, maybe you're feeding and then having a bath and PJs and brushing teeth and potty or,
Hmm.
diaper changes, lotion, singing songs, reading stories, and just
Yeah.
kind of having that consistency and doing that. And then also understanding like, they're in a regression. They've maybe had really crappy nap days. So maybe I'm not going to have a really long, drawn out bedtime routine
Hmm.
tonight. Maybe I'm going to condense it and we're going to skip the bath or skip the books or
Hmm.
whatever we need to do to like make sure my child is, getting to sleep on time and getting to sleep
Okay.
earlier as well. And that's okay. I talk about schedules and I talk about routines with my clients, and sometimes, that freaks people out. And it's like, well, I live like a busy life and I want to have a flexible life. And, I'm a mother of three. And like I said, I've worked with all types of diverse families. So I incorporate, schedules but also flexibility into their
Yeah.
life and coach them on that. So that's okay if, you're a little off on your routine that night and you have to condense it, or you get home late from like a party or an event or something and you need to condense it a little bit. That's okay. Will it throw your little one off a bit more? Probably, but again, just kind of ride the wave and have a plan
Yeah.
in place just in terms of how to deal with that. But when they're going through these regressions, sometimes, if you have a really, really busy active life, they might need a little bit more like nurturing and a little bit more
Yeah.
quiet and a little bit more wind down because their brain is already going like a
Boom, boom, boom.
mile a minute.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? So
Mhm.
if we're like just adding to that craziness of having a really busy, crazy bedtime
Yeah.
routine, then that doesn't help for sure.
Okay, so do you have any final tips for parents who have little ones going through a sleep regression?
So the biggest thing is you need to kind of have like a plan in place. So I guess education is good, just knowing that your child is in the sleep regression. So if you can reach out to, someone professional like myself to kind of educate you in terms of what's going on, or maybe you've got, friends and family that you can talk to.
Mhm.
Facebook can kind of be a little scary sometimes.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
could be good, could be bad.
Hmm.
But yeah, educating yourself, just understanding when these regressions are coming and happening, what they're going through. If you're going down the sleep training route, then sometimes that's a great time
Hmm.
to, seek professional help or, come up with a plan on your own in terms of how you're going to tackle it. I get asked a lot, like, do we wait for the regression to go away? Like Wednesday, I'm like, no, you can totally do sleep training or sleep work during the regression. Often people do come to me because sleep gets to the point where it's so
Yeah.
bad that they need support and they need help. So there's nothing wrong with doing sleep work or sleep coaching during the sleep regression. So yes, that's one option. Or if you're that's not for your family, that's not for you. You don't want to go through that, which is again my whole philosophy is rest is best. Like no judgment. It's only a problem unless it's a problem for you. Then I always tell people to just like find a way to survive, find a way to get better sleep for everyone. So whether that means you figure out co-sleeping and you have a family bed and you create a safe sleeping co-sleeping space so that your little one can sleep better and you can sleep better. But yeah, sometimes whatever you were doing isn't working anymore and you need
Mhm.
to find like a different tool to help your little one through that process. So you kind of have two directions to go. Either stick to your plan of sleep training or do sleep training, or just figure out a way that's going to help everyone get better sleep until you're ready to, make the real changes that you need to.
Okay. And then, so if
Yeah.
anybody watching, if they have any questions, or if they want to follow you on socials, can you let us know how they can find you here?
Yeah, so I'm sleep goals underscore Laura Wilson. I'm on Instagram, Facebook. I'm just Laura Wilson Sleep Consultant. You can find me on there. They can DM me. I can send them a link. I have free like discovery calls, so they can book
Oh,
a
wow.
call with me anytime. All the links are on my social.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah,
joining me here today.
you're
I appreciate it.
welcome. It was so fun. I hope your viewers learned a lot.
I know I did. I know I did.
Good, perfect.